In 2003, the town of Haverford was still reeling from the horrors that had unfolded in the years past. The Johnsons had vanished overnight, leaving nothing but a chilling emptiness behind. But the scars ran deep, festering wounds that refused to heal. I returned to Haverford, now a weary adult, haunted by nightmares of my childhood. I thought I could finally bury the past, but the moment I stepped into the familiar streets, the memories washed over me like a suffocating tide. The diner still stood, its walls adorned with faded photographs of happier times. I entered, the bell above the door chiming softly. The patrons eyed me with a mix of recognition and wariness. "You were one of those kids," a waitress said, her voice low and cautious. "What are you doing back here?" "I came to visit," I replied, forcing a smile. But deep down, I felt the weight of judgment pressing down on me. I ordered a coffee, needing the caffeine to fuel my racing thoughts. As I sipped, a familiar face stepped through the door. Sarah, my childhood friend. "I can't believe it's you," she exclaimed, her eyes wide. But the warmth of her greeting faded as she leaned in closer. "You shouldn't have come back. Things. They've changed." "What do you mean?" I asked, a sense of dread filling the pit of my stomach. "Have you heard about the new family?" she whispered, glancing around nervously. "They moved into the Johnsons' house." My blood ran cold. "What? Why would anyone do that?" "People are desperate," she said with a shudder. "But they say the new family is different. They keep to themselves, and at night strange noises come from their basement." That night, curiosity consumed me. I drove to the Johnsons' old house, its once vibrant paint now peeling and faded. The air was thick with anticipation as I approached, the moon casting eerie shadows across the yard. I could hear muffled voices from within, and as I crept closer, I spotted a flicker of light in the basement window. My heart raced as I peered inside, and what I saw froze me in place. The new family was gathered around a table, their faces illuminated by a single flickering bulb. They were not just eating dinner, they were feasting on something that resembled a meal, but the stench of death hung heavily in the air. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from behind me, and I spun around to find myself face to face with the family's teenage son, his face twisted in a manic grin. "What are you doing here?" he snarled, his voice dripping with malice. "You shouldn't have come back." "It's too late." Panic surged through me as I turned to run, but the darkness swallowed me whole. I could hear their footsteps behind me, laughter mingling with the night air. I sprinted towards my car, but as I fumbled with the keys, I felt a heavy hand grip my shoulder, spinning me around. "Join us," he said, his eyes gleaming with madness. "You can't escape your past." I fought back, adrenaline surging through my veins, and as I broke free, I could hear the laughter of the family echoing in the night. I jumped into my car, slamming the door shut. But as I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw them standing in the yard, their faces twisted into grotesque smiles, as if they were welcoming me back to the darkness. The haunting realization struck me the cycle had begun anew, and I could never escape the blood that stained our town. Haverford had become a breeding ground for horrors, and one way or another I was destined to be a part of it. As I drove away, the screams of the past echoed in my mind, and I understood the truth: some monsters wear the faces of those you once called friends. And no matter how far you run, they'll always find you in the end. It was a bright summer day in 1990 when the sun seemed to beam down on the small town of Haverford, Pennsylvania, illuminating the quiet streets and lulling its residents into a false sense of security. But beneath the surface of this idyllic setting, a darkness was brewing that would soon shatter their peace. I remember driving through the winding roads, the trees casting long shadows over the pavement. I had been visiting my aunt, but as I passed by the local diner, something caught my eye. A commotion, a crowd had gathered, all eyes glued to the flickering television set in the diner's window. I parked and stepped out, my curiosity piqued. Inside, I could see the news anchor's face twisted in horror, recounting the details of a gruesome discovery. The body of a young girl had been found in the woods, her life extinguished far too soon. I felt a chill run down my spine as I listened to the gasps and whispers of the patrons around me. Who could do such a thing?" they murmured. Little did they know, the monster was already among them. The police began to investigate, scouring the woods for clues, but they quickly realized that this was not an isolated incident. Over the following weeks, more bodies surfaced, each one more horrifying than the last. I'll never forget the day they found Lisa. She was only 12, her small frame twisted in a way that made my stomach turn. The town was paralyzed with fear, and trust evaporated like morning dew. "Do you think it's someone local?" I overheard two women whispering in a hushed tone at the grocery store. "Could it be someone from the church?" The thought sent shivers down my spine. The very fabric of our community was fraying, unraveling under the weight of suspicion. Then came the night of the candlelight vigil, a desperate attempt to reclaim some semblance of normalcy. Families gathered, clutching flickering candles as they mourned the loss of their children. But as darkness fell, a new terror seeped into the air. I glanced around, feeling as if eyes were watching us from the shadows. My heart raced as I imagined the killer lurking just beyond the glow of our tiny flames. "Stay close," my aunt whispered, her grip tightening on my hand. I nodded, but the feeling of dread was palpable. We sang hymns, the sound echoing into the night, but no amount of prayer could shield us from the reality that the beast was still out there. Days turned to weeks, and the police had no leads. The killer was a ghost, slipping through their fingers like smoke. The tension in the town was unbearable. Each day, the headlines screamed of more tragedies, and the fear transformed into paranoia. Friend turned against friend, families began to lock their doors, and children were no longer allowed to play outside. One evening I was home alone, my aunt working late, when I heard a soft knock on the door. My heart pounded as I approached, peering through the peephole. A figure stood there, cloaked in shadow. "It's just me," a voice called out. "Open up." It was a neighbor, a man I had known my whole life. I hesitated, remembering the warnings on the news about strangers. "Please, it's cold out here," he pleaded, his voice cracking. I felt an unnatural urge to open the door, the need to help overwhelming my fear. But I stood my ground. "I can't. I'm sorry." I backed away slowly, my heart racing. Suddenly, the door rattled as he pounded against it. "Let me in." "You don't understand. I'm not safe out here." Panic surged through me as I ran to the window, peering outside. I could see him pacing, his face twisted in desperation. A part of me wanted to help, but another part screamed that he was the monster. The next day, the news broke. They had caught the killer, a local man who had slipped under the radar, hiding in plain sight. But what terrified me most was the realization that I had let a monster stand at my door, begging for refuge. I never found out what happened to that neighbor after that night, and a part of me didn't want to know. The summer of 1995 brought new residents to the sleepy town of Haverford, a family who seemed too good to be true. The Johnsons, with their perfect smiles and friendly waves, quickly ingratiated themselves into our tight-knit community. But as weeks turned into months, I started to notice the cracks beneath their polished surface. It began with the children. The Johnsons' son, Danny, was always alone, wandering the streets with an unsettling intensity in his eyes. I often spotted him standing in the park, staring at the playground as if he were waiting for something or someone. The other kids avoided him, whispering tales of strange noises coming from the Johnsons' basement. "Did you hear that?" my friend Sarah asked one day after school. It sounded like someone was screaming. I shook my head, dismissing her fears as childish imagination. But as days passed, I couldn't shake the growing sense of unease that settled in my gut. One evening, I had just settled down to watch TV when I heard a faint thud coming from outside. Peering out the window, I saw Danny standing by the tree line, his face illuminated by the moonlight. I watched, entranced, as he knelt down, digging furiously at the ground. My heart raced as I saw the glint of something metallic in his hand, a shovel. "What are you doing?" I called out, my voice trembling. He froze, looking up at me with a haunting smile that sent chills down my spine. "Just playing," he replied, his voice oddly cheerful. "You should join me." I shook my head, retreating from the window, my mind racing with possibilities. What was he burying? The following day, a girl from the school went missing. Emily was vibrant and full of life, but she had vanished without a trace. My heart sank as whispers filled the hallways, fingers pointed towards the Johnsons, and Danny in particular. I decided to confront them, driven by a morbid curiosity. "Where's Emily?" I asked, my voice shaky as I stood on their doorstep. Mrs. Johnson smiled, but her eyes were cold. "Oh, she's just off visiting relatives. She'll be back soon." I nodded, but deep down, I felt something was terribly wrong. That night, sleep eluded me, and I lay awake, haunted by visions of Emily's smiling face. The next morning, I couldn't ignore the urge to investigate. I slipped out of the house and made my way to the Johnsons' backyard. The air was thick with anticipation, and as I approached the tree line, I stumbled upon a small clearing. My heart raced as I spotted a mound of freshly turned earth. I knelt down, digging my fingers into the dirt, and as I pulled away the soil, my stomach twisted in horror. There, beneath the surface, lay a tattered backpack, the unmistakable pattern of Emily's clothes peeking out. Panic surged through me as I clawed at the ground, revealing more and more of the gruesome truth. The cries of a child echoed in my mind as I uncovered a small, lifeless hand, a hand that once held dreams, now silenced forever. I stumbled back, nausea rising in my throat, and that's when I heard the soft crunch of leaves behind me. I turned slowly, the world narrowing down to a single point. Danny stood there, his innocent smile now a grotesque mask. "I told you to join me," he whispered, stepping closer, his eyes glinting with a terrifying glee. Fear paralyzed me as I turned to run, but he was faster. I felt a tug at my ankle as he tripped me, sending me sprawling to the ground. "You shouldn't have looked," he said, kneeling beside me, his small hands gripping my shoulders. "Now you have to join us."
If you like this type of videos, please subscribe to our channel. We will upload a new horror and mystery story every week.